Hi guys, first of all I'm going to apologize for the noise in the last video. It seems like my voice is kind of loud, so I'll back down a little bit. Also, the fan of my computer gets to be loud. I really can't do a whole lot about that. Also, I didn't get it stopped as soon as I should have, so hopefully you guys just stopped watching when it was really done. So we're going to continue with 6-3. Going on to part 2, I'm going to do a couple more of the ones similar to that, and then we're going to add in a couple different problems kind of going backwards, and that'll be it for part 2, and then I'll do a part 3, which is going to add a shift left or right on top of all that. So I'm going to start by looking at this function, and we'll do a negative, and we'll do a sine curve again. I'm going to put a -5 in here just to kind of see what happens with that -5. We could add or subtract. That part I'm very confident you guys can handle if that was tacked on, because it simply takes the graph, moves it up or moves it down after. This is the part I think we need to concentrate on, how to deal with that negative on the inside, because a negative is the one that's going to flip it over the y. The nicest thing to remember, so that we really don't have to mess with it much, remember that the sine curve is an odd function. And we talked a little bit about that in 6.1 and 6.2. But again, I just want to remind us that the sine function is an odd function. That means that the sine of a negative x is equal to the negative sine of x. And that kind of worked because of how we go around the axis. When we went negative in the negative direction, our y value turns negative, so we can kind of think of it that way. But what it means for us when graphing is if I have a negative on the inside of a sine function, I can pull that negative out. So basically I can graph this function by doing a negative, and it's the same as drawing this function. They will look identical. So again, to review, this is going to change our amplitude. So we're going to be going up and down to 3 instead of the 1, and this is going to change the period. So our period is going to be that 2 pi divided by 5. Not a pretty number, but we are bright. We can handle it. It's just a number. So here we go. Sine curve. Sine curve is the one that starts at 0, 0. Since this is positive, I will go up first. If it had been negative, we would have went down. So we're going to go up, and then down, and then up, and we continue to go through, and I like to draw at least 2 cycles just so that we see them. Okay, instead of going up and down to 1 and -1, since we have a 3, we will be going up to 3 and down to -3. Our period is now 2 pi over 5, so that means we went through 1 complete cycle in 2 pi over 5 units. This gets a little messier trying to break it up, but again, halfway between. So we're going to take this and multiply by a half, which is going to cancel that 2. This becomes pi over 5. So that's my 2 pi over 5 times a half, or dividing by 2. The 2's cancel, pi over 5. Halfway between there and here, we're going to be taking that half of pi over 5, which is pi over 10. And now we actually can see the counting that would be happening. Here's pi over 10. 2 pi over 10. This is actually going to be 3 pi over 10, 4 pi over 10, 5 pi over 10, which is pi over 2, 5 pi over 10, 6 pi over 10, 7 pi over 10, and 8, whoops, this one is 8 pi over 10. I'll reduce this, 3 pi over 5, and this is 4 pi over 5. So there we go. Kind of getting those values in there. So there's our curve. Simple as that. Wow, that didn't take me long at all. All right, we'll do a cosine curve as well. And then I'm going to kind of go backwards, like give you a picture, and then we have to figure out what happened to it. So let's do a 2 cosine of a negative, how about pi t? Okay, so this guy changes the amplitude. So instead of going up and down to 1, we're going to be going up and down to 2. This changes the period. So in other words, instead of 2 pi, we're going to take that 2 pi divided by pi, which is going to be 2. The negative is going to be taken care of because we're going to remember or recall that the cosine curve, should have done this first, is even, which means the cosine of a negative is equal to the cosine of the same. So they're going to be the same value. So I'm actually going to be drawing 2 cosine pi t. Draw that in there. All right. And this happens because when we dip into that second quadrant, our x value stays the same, going down instead of up, not second quadrant. Negative direction, positive direction, the x values are the same. So we have that even function. Okay, I'm going to squeeze this guy in here. Having a nice number, that pi in there might be scary at first, but it really makes things slick when we have that period. So cosine curve doesn't start at 0, 0, even though I put a dot there. Cosine actually starts at the 1, but instead of starting at 1, we're actually going to start at 2. And it's going to start up, go down, come back, and then I'm going to again draw at least 2 cycles because it never does stop. It keeps going on and on and on in both directions. So we can put little arrows on there if we want to. All right, so here's my 2, here's my negative 2. It goes through 1 complete cycle in 2 units. So this is just the number 2. Halfway between there and here is the number 1. Halfway between 0 and 1 is a half. And halfway between 1 and 2 is 3 halves, or 1.5 if you like decimals. Finishing that second cycle in another 2 units, this would be 4. Halfway between is 3. Here's my 2.5 or 5 halves, 3.5 or 7 halves. All right. All right, we're going to do one piece going backwards. Or maybe we should do 2. We'll do 2. So we are going to find the equation. Which is a little harder because we kind of have to go backwards. So here's my equation. So we're going to go negative 2, positive 2. I'm going to start here. And I'm going to draw. That is really bad. Okay. And I'm going to tell you that this is the number 4. Here's the number 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We're going up and down to negative 2. Very poorly drawn picture, but you guys are used to me drawing poor pictures. Okay. To find the equation, the first thing we have to realize is this a sine curve or is this a cosine curve? To determine that, I notice it starts at 0, 0. So that means it's going to be my sine curve. A cosine curve would start up on the axes. Okay. Instead of going up and down to 1, we're going up and down to 2. So that means I'm going to have a 2 out front. That's my amplitude. Since I went down first and not up first, that means I had a negative out front. Okay. That's the easy part. The next part is to find out what our period is. Our period, again, is the time it takes to start and go through the entire curve until we stop to finish. So our period is 4. To find the number in front here, we're going to take that 4 and set it equal to 2 pi over some k. And now we're going to solve for k. So multiplying both sides by k, and then dividing by 4. That's going to tell me the number that's going to be out in front, or in front of that variable inside here. So this is the function that represented that curve. Again, pick off the little pieces as you go. Okay, here's another one. Let's see if I can draw it here. This is really bad. Okay, this goes up to a half. And we're going to say this point here is 4 pi over 3. This point here is 2 pi over 3. This point here would be pi over 3. And this point here, which is right there at 1, which is pi. Hopefully you guys can understand my curve. It is drawn pretty poorly, and I apologize. I'm not an expert sketcher. So, to find out what curve this is, first thing again, sine curve or cosine curve. Also, we've noticed it's not centered around the axis, so it has kind of shifted up or down. So what I first look for is, where's that center? I kind of look for that, you know, that middle piece. And you'll see that it is shift kind of, well, it's supposed to be right at this -1, which means I've taken this curve and I've moved it down 1 unit. So I'm going to put that in first. So I'm going to have that -1 to shift it down first. Noticing then it's not starting at that centered point like a sine curve does. It starts at one of the extremes, means I have a cosine. So starting at one of those extremes instead of starting at the center is going to be a cosine curve. Now to find the amplitude, notice we go up and down a half from that center. So I'm going to put a half in there. And we started at the bottom extreme, which means I didn't start at the top and go down. I started at the bottom and went up. So that gives me a negative. And now to figure out the part that's inside with that t. All right, to do that, locate our period. So how long does it take us to go through one cycle? And that's 4 pi over 3. And set that equal to 2 pi over k. And find k. So I'm going to cross multiply. So multiplying by the 3, multiplying by the k, dividing by that 4 pi, reducing. That gives me the value in front of that t. I hope this is making it easier for you. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. Thanks.